in conversation with Jeff, he suggested that I sort of sketch a political economy of art and then propose some kind of possible prototypes for ArtFutures, some possible strange ecologies. So obviously that's a really tall order, but I'm going to do my best. So I thought I'd start with a sketch of how I've evolved the practice that I practice as an artist, just to sort of set the scene. So until 2008, I should say that collaboration and research are kind of central to how I work. Until 2008, I worked specifically with another artist called Marysia Lewandowska, and we collaborated together. But I also collaborated with other artists, with curators, with academics, with archivists, with gallerists, students, people with technical expertise, enthusiasts, as Jeff already mentioned, and various kinds of collectors. And just to say that I've moved away from this idea of producing autonomous objects as art. So I'm not sitting in a studio like this, making something, hoping someone else one day will be interested in it. When you work with cultural institutions, and I'm fairly familiar with the Tate, they display about 17% of their collection. So 83% of it is in permanent storage. So as an artist, you figure, well, why produce something that's just going to live in permanent storage? And there's obviously implications for material and increasingly scarce resources that we all have to be more conscious about what we try and use. So I've tried to evolve this in this research way of practicing a very light material footprint and using very easily renewable materials. So I've returned my attention from the traditional sites of arts production, if you like, a space like this, to the spaces where, as Jeff already hinted at, that spaces where it gets distributed and where it encounters its audience. Places where, if you like, the work of the work of art is actually produced, where that work is actually encounters its audience. So again, as Jeff has already said, I've worked with museums, with department stores, with archives, collections, auction houses, I've already said department stores, art schools, publishers, broadcasters. Again, as Jeff already said, all of these institutions that kind of choreograph the exchanges between art and its various publics. But I'm also interested in the space where the art world and art dissolves into everything else. So where it engages things like publications, catalogues, promotional materials. I'm interested in the spaces that museums have in terms of educational projects, their outreach work, their talks, their lectures, their competitions, their prizes, their audio tours, their gallery guides, the fact they buy advertising spaces, their web, and increasingly their online presence. So I see all of that as part of this kind of exhibitionary project of our cultural institutions. I'd also include various forms of funding. So the fact that these institutions might get state or private funding. I'm interested in what kinds of obligations, sponsorship, donations, and the offerings of various gifts impinge upon those institutions and the kind of audiences that they can convene. And I'm also interested in the kind of conflicted political aspirations that are increasingly being placed upon cultural institutions. The idea that they can somehow regenerate cities, that they can somehow increase inward investment, that they can somehow act as agents of social cohesion, or they could contribute to well-being. They can somehow offset the effects of austerity. So all these political implications that are also being increasingly demanded of cultural organizations. I'm sort of also interested in the friendships that run through institutions, the kind of dinners, the kind of parties, the kind of sponsorship events that they have to make these kind of links to political and financial organizations. So I'd like to paint a picture of a kind of a network, if you like, an institutional network of meshing ecologies of objects, knowledge, finance, people, goodwill, loyalty, trust, that these are somehow the mediums through which, as an artist, I'm trying to work. I'm trying to work with these as if they were my materials, if you like. Of course, I'm not the only artist to think or work like this. I'd like to connect to a whole legacy of something which many of you are familiar with called institutional critique. So that's a kind of sketch of the kind of context, I guess, in which I think I work. I'm sorry. And I'm going to give you some concrete examples. So I'm going to start with a project I made with Marisha called Capital at the Bank of England, at Tate Modern, the Bank of England, in 2001. In a way, it was a key project. It was commissioned by senior curator Francis Morris, who's now director of Tate Modern. And Marisha and I, with a series of other artists, were invited to research and make a proposal for the Tate's opening. And we were asked to think about Tate's environment, so where it was in Shoreditch, in Southwark, in the south of London, its relationship to the City of London, and, if you like, London more generally, to think about how the new Tate Modern was going to fit into this new environment. And the more that Marisha and I learnt about the Tate, its ambition, Tate St Ives, Tate Liverpool, Tate Modern, Tate Britain, its huge departmental structure of education, exhibition, its vast stores, as I said, where 83% of the collection is permanently in storage, outreach, networks of patrons and friends, international friends. We realised that exhibition is just a sliver of Tate's activities. And we began to think how, because obviously it loans parts of its collections out, so it networks into other public organisations. It also obviously has relationships to commercial galleries that are much more difficult to understand. How it, in a way, it began to function like a central bank. Maybe it's like a central bank in a kind of symbolic economy. Could it be like a central bank? And we realised that when you stand in this room at Tate Modern that you're looking at now, you look across the river, you can see the Bank of England. So about a year before Tate Modern was to open, Marisha and I tried to contact the Bank of England about doing some kind of project with Tate. And in itself, that was like a huge and difficult project. How do you contact the Bank of England? Even using the leverage of the Tate, it was really difficult. So with lots of letters and emails and calls, eventually we met the curator, John Keyworth, of the Bank of England Museum. And with John's help, we began to research a little bit about what the Bank of England does. And a little bit about its history. And I was absolutely stunned by my own ignorance. Like, what does the Bank of England do? And how does it make money circulate? So I'm going to try and explain very briefly the function of the Bank of England. I'm going to cut a very, very long and complicated story very short. So the Bank of England is the banker to the whole British financial system, and it plays a major role in structuring local to Britain, but also international financial relations. It does this principally by being the lender of last resort. So if a financial institution is going to go under, the Bank of England has the power to prop it up. It will only do it if it sees a systemic financial collapse. So it's the lender of last resort. It's going to hold up the whole of the financial institution if there's a systemic collapse. And you might remember in 2008, the Bank of England poured £500 billion of liquidity into the debt markets to try and keep the debt markets from seizing. So that was it using its force as the lender of last resort. So it uses the lender of last resort, gives it a kind of authority to guarantee the necessary trust and confidence to secure these various interlocking debt markets, the foreign, commodity and the financial markets. And the principal mechanism it has for doing this is raising or lowering the cost of debt. So you might have heard of the famous Monetary Policy Committee. They meet every now and again and they decide whether they should raise interest rates or lower interest rates. And it's the cost of debt that they use, the price of debt that they use to keep liquidity in the markets that they're giving the trust and confidence to circulate. And the debt that they're managing the price of, lowering and raising, is principally the government's debt. And the government's debt is the government's debt that was first founded the Bank of England in 1694. The government was running out of money in the war, the government king, and so it borrowed money. And that money has never ever been repaid. So the cost of that debt is the thing that fuels our whole national economy. So that's the function of the Bank of England. One small thing about money, I of course thought in the Bank of England there'd be a huge vault full of gold, and of course there isn't. There is no gold in the Bank of England. The money that circulates through our economy is backed by either promises to pay, lend, or repay other kinds of assets in some future point elsewhere. There is no thing that authorises the money but trust and confidence. So the Bank of England is a much more symbolic institution than I ever could have imagined. So we begin to make parallels between the Tate and the bank, how they share this kind of symbolic but authoritative structure, and they network into these different kinds of economies. But there's a major structural difference. The major structural difference is, you might have seen in this film, that the Tate was founded with a gift from Sir Henry Tate in 1887. So he had a huge collection, Henry Tate. He goes to give it to the nation, and the nation says, actually, we don't want your gift, thanks. So then he says, well, what about if I give you money to build an institution to house the collection? And the government said, okay, let's do that. So he gave money, he built a gallery of national art to house his collection. So the Tate is founded with a gift, whereas we know the bank is founded with a debt. And any of you that have ever looked at social anthropology will realise that gifts are one of the great structural devices that run through social anthropology. Marcel Mauss's famous book from 1925, I believe, called The Gift, sets up this economy of gifting and debt that predates money, so it's an archaic social structure, but of course we can't erase it either. Gifts still pertain in our cultural lives powerfully. And if you don't think it's powerful, just imagine that Christmas is coming. And all of the kind of fear, all of the kind of joy, all of the kind of anxiety that surrounds Christmas. And Mauss proposes that we're all already born into networks of gifts and debt. So there's no original gift, there's no original debt, you're born into it, and you're always beholden to either repay or gift. And Mauss says, okay, so when a plumber, she comes to fix the leaking tap in my kitchen, I pay her a fee, and that cancels my relationship with her. She comes, I pay her, the job's done. If she comes and says, and actually she's my neighbour, and she says, no, actually I don't want payment, it's just a kind of favour, I know I owe her something. I know I have to repay that somehow in the future. Maybe I have to make some bread and give it to her or whatever. But there's some kind of, I've been given a gift and now I have to repay it somehow. Gifts can transfer. Anyway, I could go on for ages, but I won't. So gifts and debts are the things that we're trying to work with. So what you're seeing here is, what Marisha and I proposed was to make a limited edition print, and that print would be given away by members of the Bank of England Museum and people who worked at the Tate. So anyone who worked at Tate could sign up. They would then at a certain time of the day be given the print, and they could go to this room and choose someone who was visiting the Tate and give them the print. So in some ways it was like paying back the audience for their time and generosity. these institutions were somehow giving something back. And you can see that what the people who were giving the gift were asked to do was to say their name, say what they did, and say, this is for you. But of course, none of them actually did that. They all enter into some kind of explanation about what it is they think they're doing. The Bank of England produced a piece of paper that they had to hand out to try and explain what was going on. So there was something powerful happening. A kind of disinterested museum visit was turned into this kind of quite emotional exchange between people getting this print. Yeah, I'm gonna run over, so I'll just cut it there, I think. But I think there is something, so there's something in this moment for me that was the powerful bit, which is what I was trying to explain to you earlier, like people are negotiating what it is, what's going on now. What is this, what is happening here? Is this where the work of the artwork starts to work? So she's trying to authorize the fact, yes, she has got that print from the Tate collection. Okay, I'm going to stop that there. I'm going to cut brutally to 2006 and 2007. I want you to think of the Frieze Art Fair, 2006, 2007. Was flourishing. It started in 2004, but now it's really finding its feet. It's powerful. Various blue chip galleries from New York are moving to London. In the university where I work, oh yeah, what time did we start, Jeff? Oh, blimey. So the art school where I work started to have special breakfasts for collectors when there were degree shows, so that groups of collectors would come, they'd have a special breakfast, and they could see the students' degree show before the official opening, so they could try and buy artworks. The Arts Council started to have special loans so that individuals could buy artworks. Everyone started to talk about the art market. There was a kind of gloss and glamour around this idea of the market. People started reporting the prices paid for artworks. Collectors were becoming celebrities, and in a way celebrities were beginning to become art collectors. There was this kind of power and influence of this art market. And again, a little bit like the Bank of England, I suddenly thought, I don't really know what this art market is. I'm an artist, 30 years working, but I don't really know what this market is. What is it? How does it work? Because outside of public museums and a few secretive collectors and a few free ports like the one in Geneva, artwork circulates through competitive markets, through an art market. But it seems quite mysterious to me what this market is. So I started to do some research, and I'm going to have to tell you now another very, very long, complicated story in a very short space of time. Which is basically there are two markets for art. There's the primary market. Okay, the primary market is maybe the market that we, as artists and people working in cultural organizations, know about. It's like the primary market. It's dominated by more or less commercial galleries and gallerists, and they work directly with artists to try and nurture their career and to exhibit their artworks. And they try and build a kind of collector base. They try and build a market for those artworks. It's called the primary market because that's seen as like the raw material. Artists and art is the raw material. So there's a primary relationship between those things. And of course, the primary market gallerists assume the risk. They invest a lot in trying to nurture the artist and nurture the market for those artwork. as well as, of course, they're trying to position those artworks outside of the competitive market. They want to put the artworks in places like the Tate, because even though they're outside of the market, they also then lend credibility, which is what the Tate's job is, right? If you think of my Bank of England's metaphor. So they lend a kind of authority, which obviously affects the primary market. It affects the possible prices. And in this market, if an artwork sells, I'm sure you're all aware, but the artist gets a percentage of that sale. So it's like something sells, the artist benefits. Fair enough. So far, so good.
I'm Emily Vickery. I'm a final year chemist at Plymouth.
Okay, and can you tell me why you chose the University?
I chose the University of Plymouth because it's close to home, so for me I didn't want to go too far, and also the course content, there's a lot of practical elements in the course which is far more interesting and really helps my learning.
Okay, and why is it you like practical work?
I really enjoy the practical work because it also backs up the theory learnt in lectures and means that I have a real world understanding of what I'm learning.
Okay, and can you tell me, I know you came in with clearing.
Yes. So I didn't meet the grades for my other course, and so decided to go through clearing to get in. And when I spoke to the admissions teacher at Plymouth, they were really welcoming, and it really felt like it was somewhere where I'd enjoy studying for 4 years.
How did you feel having to go through?
Going through clearing was very stressful, to say the least. I was very anxious, but all in all, it was actually a very smooth process. And speaking to someone on the other end of the phone who was really helpful, really helped with that process and really eased my nerves.
What would you say to someone who goes through clearing this year? What would your advice to them be?
I'd just advise to them to be calm and not panic about making a decision. You have all day to make that decision, and I know with about half an hour to go, I started getting worried and just spoke to my parents and calmed myself down. But also really research the university before you call them, just so that you know whether it's somewhere that you would enjoy studying.
Okay, and did you come down to clearing open today?
I did. So I came down about 2 days after getting my offer and looked around just to ensure that I'd really enjoy the course and sort of meet a few people, including several lecturers who were really welcoming and really made sure that I had made the right decision.
Okay, and do you want to talk a little bit about your placement?
Yeah, so in my third year, I went on a placement year to Imre's in Cornwall, and while I was there, I carried out a research project on behalf of the company. That was really helpful, and I now have a better understanding of what working in industry is like.
Talk a little bit about what you...
Yeah, so while I was there, I was working within the carbonates specialties department. So I was researching putting calcium carbonate in breathable films that are used in things like nappies, and sort of different treatments that are used on those in order to see if there was a better product available.
Okay, and do you want to talk a little bit about the facilities at Plymouth?
Yeah, there's really great facilities at Plymouth. There's so much lab space and lab time, and also some really good instrumentation that we get to use throughout the entire course, which is really good. And all the staff really supportive and always really willing to help you learn how to improve on certain apparatus.
I'm looking around. I don't think you...
Oh, I'm done. Yes. And really made sure that I had made the right decision.
Okay, and do you want to talk a little bit about your placement?
Yeah, so in my third year, I went on a placement year to Imre's in Cornwall, and while I was there, I carried out a research project on behalf of the company. That was really helpful, and I now have a better understanding of what working in industry is like.
Talk a little bit about what you...
Yeah, so while I was there, I was working within the carbonates specialties department. So I was researching putting calcium carbonate in breathable films that are used in things like nappies, and sort of different treatments that are used on those in order to see if there was a better product available.
Okay, and do you want to talk a little bit about the facilities at Plymouth?
Yeah, there's really great facilities at Plymouth. There's so much lab space and lab time, and also some really good instrumentation that we get to use throughout the entire course, which is really good. And all the staff really supportive and always really willing to help you learn how to improve on certain apparatus.
I'm looking around. I don't think you...
Oh, I'm done. Yes. And really made sure that I had made the right decision.
Okay, and do you want to talk a little bit about your placement?
Yeah, so in my third year, I went on a placement year to Imre's in Cornwall, and while I was there, I carried out a research project on behalf of the company. That was really helpful, and I now have a better understanding of what working in industry is like.
Talk a little bit about what
Yeah, so while I was there, I was working within the carbonate specialties department. So I was researching putting calcium carbonate in breathable films that are used in things like nappies, and sort of different treatments that are used on those in order to see if there was a better product available.
Okay, and do you want to talk a little bit about facilities at Plymouth?
Yeah, there's really great facilities at Plymouth. There's so much like lab space and lab time, and also some really good instrumentation that we get to use throughout the entire course, which is really good. And all the staff are really supportive and are always really willing to help you learn how to improve on certain apparatus.
Look around. I don't think
Oh, I'm done. Yes. And really made sure that I had made the right decision.
Okay, and do you want to talk a little bit about your placement?
Yeah, so in my third year, I went on a placement year to Imre's in Cornwall, and while I was there, I carried out a research project on behalf of the company. That was really helpful, and I now have a better understanding of what working in industry is like.
Talk a little bit about what
Yeah, so while I was there, I was working within the carbonate specialties department. So I was researching putting calcium carbonate in breathable films that are used in things like nappies, and sort of different treatments that are used on those in order to see if there was a better product available.
Okay, and
Lullaby Spring by Damien Hirst, showing on the far wall, well illuminated. And let's start the bidding at £2,300,000. At £2,300,000 is bid at £2,300,000, £2,400,000, £2,500,000 already. At £2,600,000 is bid at £2,600,000. At £2,600,000, with Stefano, £2,600,000. Who would say £2,700,000? At £2,600,000, the bid is with Stefano, £2,600,000. At £2,600,000. The bid is with Stefano, £2,600,000. £2,700,000, thank you. £2,800,000, £2,900,000. Will you say 3 million? 3 million with Stefano. 3,000,001, 3,000,002, 3,000,003, 3,000,004, 3,000,005, 3,000,006, 3,000,007, 3,000,008, 3,000,009, 4 million. 4,000,001. It's 4,100,000. 4,000,002. 4,000,003. 4,000,004. 4,000,005 with Loic. 4,000,006 with Grégoire at 4,000,006. 4,000,007, new bidder. At 4,000,007 now. At 4,007, 4,008, new bidder. 4,009. 5 million. One more. At 5 million pounds. At 5 million pounds. At 5 million pounds on the back. Should we try? 5,000,001. 5,000,002. No. At 5,000,002. Let's try one more. At 5,000,002. At 5,200,000 pounds in the very back. At 5,000,002. 5,003. 5,3 in front now. At 5,003. In the room at 5,003. 5,004. At 5,400,000 pounds. I know what that was. At 5,400,000. One more. At 5,400,000. Are you sure? Both. At 5,400,000 pounds then, the bid is in the far back of the room. 5,005,000. At 5 million 5 now, with Ollie. Let's try one more. 5 million 6. 5 million 7. 5 million 8. 5 million 9. At 5 million 9. At 5 million 6 million. 6 million 1. 6 million 2. 6 million 3. 6 million 4. 6 million 5. 6 million 6. It's 6 million 6 now. 6 million 7. It's 6 million 8. 6 million 9. That's 6 million 9. Let's go. 7 million. 7 million 1. That's 7 million 1. 7 million 2. 7 million 3. 7 million 4. 7 million 5. 7 million 6. 7 million 7. 7 million 8. 7 million 9. 8 million. 8 million 1. 8 million 2. 'Ollie, at 8 million 2, it's against you. 8 million 3. 8 million 3 with Ollie at 8 million 3. At 8 million 300,000. Are you sure? At 8 million 3. The bid is with Ollie then. Are we all done? At 8 million 300,000 pounds then, fair warning, selling then to Ollie's bidder, 8 million 4. You see? At 8 million 4. Ollie, come again. At 8 million 4. 8 million 5. Are you bidding? 8 million 6. At 8 million 6. No, at 8 million 600,000 pounds and against you, Ollie. One more try. Are you done? At 8 million 600,000 pounds then. It is not your bid, Ollie. Selling now for 8 million 600,000 pounds. Are you sure? 139. That is a world record for a living British artist, by the way. Lot 37, the Sujimoto. Sold as viewed. And 35, 38, 40,000 pounds a bid at 42,000 pounds. At 42,000. 45,000. 8 million. 8 million 1. 8 8 million 2. Ollie. At 8 million 2, it's against you. 8 million 3. It's 8 million 3 with Ollie at 8 million 3. At 8 million 300,000. Are you sure? At 8 million 3. If it is with Ollie then, are we all done? At 8,300,000 pounds then, fair warning, selling then to Ollie's bidder, 8 million 4. You see? At 8 million 4. Ollie, come again. At 8 million 4. 8 million 5. Are you bidding? 8 million 6. At 8 million 6. No, at 8,600,000 pounds and against you, Ollie. One more try. Are you done? At 8,600,000 pounds then. It is not your bid, Ollie. Selling now for 8,600,000 pounds. Are you sure? 139. That is a world record for a living British artist, by the way. Lot 37, the Sujimoto. Sold as viewed. And 35, 38, 40,000 pounds a bid at 42,000 pounds. At 42,000. 45,000. 8 million. 8 million 1. 8 million 2. Ollie. At 8 million 2, it's against you. 8 million 3. It's 8 million 3 with Ollie at 8 million 3. At 8,300,000. Are you sure? At 8,000,003. If it is with Ollie then, are we all done? At 8,300,000 pounds then, fair warning, selling then to Ollie's bidder, 8,000,004. You see? At 8,000,004. Ollie, come again. At 8,000,004. 8,000,005. Are you bidding? 8,000,006. At 8,000,006. No, at 8,600,000 pounds and against you, Ollie. One more try. Are you done? At 8,600,000 pounds then. It is not your bid, Ollie. Selling now for 8,600,000 pounds. Are you sure? 139. That is a world record for a living British artist, by the way. Lot 37, the Sujimoto. Sold as viewed. And 35, 38, 40,000 pounds a bid at 42,000 pounds. At 42,000. 45,000. 8 million. 8,000,001. 8,000,002. Ollie. At 8,000,002, it's against you. 8,000,003. It's 8,000,003 with Ollie at 8,000,003. At 8,300,000. Are you sure? At 8,000,003. If it is with Ollie then, are we all done? At 8,300,000 pounds then, fair warning, selling then to Ollie's bidder, 8,000,004. You see? At 8,000,004. Ollie, come again. At 8,000,004. 8,000,005. Are you bidding? 8,000,006. At 8,000,006. No, at 8,600,000 pounds and against you, Ollie. One more try. Are you done? At 8,600,000 pounds then. It is not your bid, Ollie. Selling now for 8,600,000 pounds. Are you sure?
Ni hao. Hey. Hello? Hello, is that Ian Lindquist?
Ni hao. Yes, Miss Chan. This is Ayan. We are in sync.
Thank you so much for finding time. I know you must be very busy with the centenary
It's a
launch
pleasure.
and
We really admire your work on mid-20th century image ecologies, especially your research on archival practice.
well, I'm flattered. For many Asian non-market institutions, your pioneering work with long-term equity contract has been inspirational too.
So, let's begin.
Okay, just to refresh, for the centenary, I'd like to archive your live thread recall of Modana.
Yep, that's fine. I've enabled about 20 minutes.
Okay, live. Maybe we could start with some personal history. What were you doing before you became executive at Modana Musette 3?
Well, I joined Moderna 2 in 2049, almost 10 years ago. First as advisor to the development working group, then as part of the governance team. I participated in the forking of Moderna 3 in 251 and was elected fixed-term executive in 252, until today. I've got another 4 years in the project.
And before that?
Immediately before joining Moderna, I collaborated in the exhibition program at the Makba cluster in Mumbai for 6 years, although more in resource provision. That's where we worked on a version of that equity bond issue you mentioned.
And before that?
In programming, again at Tate in Doha for 4 years, particularly developing exhibitionary platforms. And even before that, I participated in research on cultural governance for the Nordic Congress of the European Multitude for 6 years. I suspect exhibition agency and governance are my real strengths.
Maybe we should dive into the deep end. Could you briefly say something of why Modana 3 devolved and why was it necessary?
As you can imagine, there was a lot of consultation beforehand. It's not something we did without due diligence. Now, for almost 40 years, Moderna version 2 has explored and developed the exhibitionary form. And we pioneered the production of many collaborative exhibitions, resources, and assemblages. We helped build robust public, what you prefer to term non-market cultural networks, and scaled those networks to produce our iCommons, part of the vast global public domain. Now, we have continually nurtured and developed emergent art practice. And Moderna can proudly and quite rightly say that we participated in shaping the early 21st century movement of art, from an exhibitionary practice based around art artifacts, spectacle, and consumption, to that of embedded co-production.
Do you mean that...
Of course, there were many complex factors involved, but we were agent in the shift from a heritage cultural mindset of broadcast to that of emergent peer-to-peer meshworks. Following the logic of practice, we became an imminent institution. Although, having said all that, we've not really answered your question, have we? Given that Moderna 2 continues its exhibitionary research, some of us believe that exhibition as a technology and immanence as an institutional logic needed to be subject to radical revision. So this is what we intend to explore with Moderna 3. We want to execute some of the research, to enact, to be more agent than immanent.
Okay, I was wondering, could you say a...
Sorry to overwrite, but in a way the forking follows something of the tradition of the Moderna Musette. The Moderna too mutated through one because the tension between trying to collect, conserve and exhibit the history of 20th century art and at the same time trying to be a responsible 21st century art institution proved too difficult to reconcile. Moderna 1 continues its mandate, its buildings and collection has global heritage status. In turn, the early hybridization enabled Moderna 2 to be more mobile and experimental in its organizational form, in its devolved administration and its exhibition-making practice.
Could you just expand on the more complex factors you mentioned earlier?
That's a big question. Let me rerun a general thread from Composite. Well, a good place to start might be the bifurcation of the market for contemporary art from emergent art practices themselves. Although the public domain has a long genealogy, way back into ancient European land rights, commons projects, and Commonwealth, it was the advent of digitalization and particularly very early composite language projects in the 1980s, which, and this appears astonishing to us now, were proprietary, that kick-started what were called open, free, or non-market resource initiatives. Of course, these languages, assemblages, and the resources they were building needed legal protection, licenses to keep them out of property and competitive marketization. The general public license, the legendary GPL legal code, was written in 1989.
It's not so old.
So then text and images, either still or moving, artifacts, systems and processes, music and sound, either as source or assembled, all embedded plant, animal, and bodily knowledge, public research, and all possible ecologies of these resources began to be aggregated by the viral licenses into our public domain. Landmarks include the releasing of the sequenced human genome in 2001, the foundation of the Multitude Social Enterprise Coalition in 2009, intellectual property reform in the teens, the UN Multitude-initiated microtaxation of global financial transactions in 2013, which redirected so many financial resources to public domain cultural initiatives, and, well, I could go on and on and on. But anyway, most participants will be over-familiar with this thread.
Remind me, when did Moderna affiliate?
In archive records suggest Öppnedagar or Hurrifrun till Almanningen with Mejan in... I'm sorry. We did some collaborative open knowledge projects with Mejan in Stockholm in late 2009. And when Moderna 2 launched in 2012, we declared all new knowledge General Public License version 6 compliant.
Wasn't that initiated by Chus Martinez, one of your predecessors? She seems to have shaped early Moderna 2, which in turn became an inspiration globally.
It's nice you say so. Since 2012, we collaborated with the fledgling Nordic Congress in what was to become the European Multitude to form the backbone of the public domain cultural meshwork. It eventually convened in late 2022, so we were at source.
Okay, thank you.
Now, simultaneous with the exponential growth of the public domain was the market for what we still call contemporary art. Now, many historians locate one of the sources for the contemporary art market as the auction in 1973 of the art artifact collection of Robert and Ethel Scull, an extraordinary collection of paintings by pop male artists like Andy Warhol, Klaus Oldenburg, Ed Ruscha, and, I recall Jasper Johns.
From Composite, I'm streaming this John shot analog film of the sale from New York MoMA's public domain archive.
It's a great film, and many of the art artifacts have subsequently devolved to Moderna.
I have the catalog. It's present. I'm browsing.
Well, that auction set record prices for many artists. It also connected art artifacts with
So the timelines that I developed for the Moderna project, so these sort of longitudinal studies, to been able to mix different kinds of information and thread them together, found a form because the Arnolfini was 50 years old in 2011. Thank you, Tom. And so there's a bit of a theme going here. They invited me to help them celebrate their 50th birthday. And it wasn't sad at all, like in Moderna Musette. It was much more much more enjoyable. But so I started to use these sort of timelines, these sort of structural timelines, and decided to thread three timelines up through the Arnolfini's public spaces, so up through the stairwell of the Arnolfini. And these are three timelines that mix social organisation, technological innovation, social and financial organisation, and key kind of artworks, key exhibitions, both at the Arnolfini and elsewhere. And each bit of information was in this kind of data, I call them data sprites, they're kind of nano-narratives, these tiny little threads that began in 1831 with the Bristol Reform riots, so a long time before the Arnolfini, and went on to 2061. So this is the team installing. And then I think it's fair to say the timeline was quite successful. It was quite popular. And also, obviously, you only get these little you get these little snippets of information. But we decided to publish a publication to fill out, if you like, all of the research that had gone on to produce the timelines. So again, it starts in 1831 and goes to 2061. So it has all of the kind of the more of the narrative structure. And I guess this is what I've been working with for the last 10 years, is these kind of narrative structures that have deep historical roots, but also project forward into the future. And I think this is what I wanted to propose, that the future is a kind of strange ecology. Of course, I understand that I'm not writing the future. I'm not in any way trying to predict or I'm not trying to predict what's going to happen. It's more a series of possibilities to create kind of scenarios. And I'm thinking of these timelines like I would think of as a map. That a map somehow enables you to trace aspects of a landscape, to trace topological detail, to map populations that inhabit that landscape, the resources, the infrastructures that can facilitate that place. So maps help us picture and produce and navigate as yet unknown territory. And in some ways they enable you to inhabit that territory, even if you're inhabiting it imaginatively. So I've come to see that building these timelines as a kind of map tracing activity to enable me to inhabit these future scenarios. And this is really popular in business and political circles. This scenario building is really useful for people like, there's a whole team of people that do it at ESO, for instance. But it's not something that I think we're very familiar with. When I work with cultural organizations, I realize that they live in a very shallow time frame. That if they have a plan, if they have a 5-year plan, or if they have a 3-year plan, that plan will be a financial plan or a business plan. It won't be a plan for their aspirations for what they want to do or what they want to be. And again, most cultural organizations don't have very good archives. They forget very quickly what they've done. So I think we live in these very shallow spaces, and I think we're clearly living in urgent times, and that things need to change regarding our the effects we're having in terms of climate, the kind of chaos that we're producing in terms of climate change and global warming. I keep reading about mass extinctions, and even the national treasure David Attenborough yesterday suggested that we can see the scenario where we can imagine our own extinction. And I was reminded of a quote which is attributed to Frederick Jameson, who says, well, it's easier for us to imagine our own extinction than it is for us to imagine the end of capitalism. And I think that's one of the challenges that I see, is to produce future scenarios that can that they reveal the kind of assumptions we have that we live with in the present. And I think one of the challenges for art and its institutions in these urgent times is to engage more creatively and perhaps more effectively in the present. Thank you.